asking questions like, what are my specific duties? What governance do I have? What kind of stay do I have on a project or the work I'm doing? What are my hours? And then, quite frankly, because there's a lot today of people entering from academia into very exciting companies, you say, gee, how much will I be able to own of this company? What kind of stock program do you have?
Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today, I have the great pleasure of having with me Zdenek. Al is an entrepreneur and leader in the wealth management industry for more than 40 years. He is a personal financial specialist, a CPA, and the author of Amazon best-selling books, Master Your Cash Flow, The Key to Grow and Retain Wealth, and Master Your Business Cash Flow. Grow the company you love, live the life you want now. Al recently co-founded Cake Club, a financial technology company and creator of the Cake Club app to educate users on how to make the best financial decisions, find cash flow, achieve financial goals sooner, and live the life they wish along the way. Al is also an aspiring classical concert pianist aiming to appear at Carnegie Hall. Al, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that tidbit about playing an instrument. A lot of us in academia and a lot of us creatives or entrepreneurs have this this aspect of being curious about different things, and I think it's interesting to hear that someone with your history, with your professional history, with the work you do, also has a more of an artistic side to you. I think it's always interesting to share that with the
Well,
audience.
thank you, David. But I will say one thing about the piano. I took it up when I was 66.
Okay.
So, I always wanted to do it. 50 years passed and sold my company. And I said, I think I'll take up classical piano.
And that's another message that is often there's a narrative out there which is, oh no, if you don't start at 7 years old, that's it, you missed it. And you're not the first person I've heard, and actually the first business person I've heard saying, no, you can, you're 50, you're 60, if you really want to put the effort in, you can have fun and enjoy learning something.
I definitely agree. Yes.
Very good. Now, Al, I am so excited to have you here today, and I kind of already mentioned it to you just before we hit record, because you have spent a bunch of years working and helping people and organizations with their financial health, the financial stability, financial planning, and my audience, so the people who are now listening to us, are people who are kind of crossing between worlds from academia, where in terms of financing, in terms of money, in terms of salary, things are pretty much structured and defined. There's different mechanisms of getting grants, etc. But the academic career has a kind of a rule book that it follows that is very particular. But then when these people decide that academia is no longer the place that they want to continue their professional journey in, then they get into something completely different. They get into conversations where someone asks them, how much do you want to make for this position? And then things get dicey because they're not ready, or very often they're not ready for those conversations. And then they end up navigating those conversations in a way that hinders them in their financial health, in their career development, etc. And I know that you have worked with academics, because we've talked about it with graduate students. So I will just like we say here in Canada, I'll just pass the puck to you, and maybe start you talking with a prompt which would be What of what I said, what rings true the most? What have you seen with people you've talked with that got that got you kind of slapping your forehead, or and thinking, oh my God, no, you didn't do this, did you? What are gaps? What are blind spots that people have when leaving academia that it's really important to take care of before having these types of conversations?
That's good. And I'll say, and you described the academic world very well. It's more rigid, more boundaried, and the business world is not. It can be, for certain positions, but especially if someone's asking you what you want to earn, most people immediately think of cash flow, their salary. But there's other things to think about. And make sure you have the benefits, whether it's health or whatever. Ask if they have a pension plan for you, a 401k. How much do they match? Another great question to ask them, and most likely they won't do something about it, but some will, is, and especially if you have student loans, how can you help me with my student loans? You have a program to where I work for you so long, you forgive them, you pay them. Or again, if you have someone who still wants, they are in the business world now, but they still want to have a foot in the academic world and study, what kind of programs do you pay for? How do you reimburse? And then what degrees, if I got, what does that mean in promotion or more money for me? But it does begin with the first on how much you want to make, because you can have employers, potential employers ask you. And I would say it's not a whole lot of percent of these of people doing this, but there's going to be a certain like 10 or 15% that may want to be self-employed. They may want to be consultants. And by the way, I encourage that, because as a consultant, self-employed, there's a lot more things you can deduct. You understand, as well as a financial planner and wealth advisor, I'm also a CPA. So if all of a sudden you're self-employed, you could have potential office in the home, other expenses that you would not, things like you have for internet, books, other things, newspapers, that you would not be able to deduct on your tax return. So, and another thing about being self-employed, which is extremely important, it's important for you to get a good CPA around you, for one thing. Always have good experts around you. Have I call a championship team, someone who's going to really help you save you money. And when I say a good CPA, for example, you want someone that they say, well, gee, you're self-employed, you could have a pension. There's certain pensions you could have individually that can be extremely advantageous. So that's when it's self-employed. Let's get back to the person who's going to work for a paycheck. Again, it's really important to go out, before you go out in the world or before you're having an interview like this, is try to find out what the ranges of salaries are for positions that you want. And then when a person asks you, go high. This is called negotiation, which I find academics are terrible at. By the way, not only academics, most young people are terrible at this. But so you ask that, and make sure before you go in the interview, you have for yourself a list of things that are important for you to have in this position. Now, of course, there's the compensation, pension, every other thing I mentioned before. But I think another important thing is asking questions like, what are my specific duties? What governance do I have? What kind of say do I have on a project or the work I'm doing? What are my hours? And then, quite frankly, because there's a lot today of people entering from academia into very exciting companies, you can say, gee, how much will I be able to own of this company? What kind of stock program do you have? And by the way, if you approach an interview that way, you're going to look a lot more savvy to the person you're dealing with. And so have an idea of, especially for that company, what they offer. You can probably look it up. Look at the job categories. What's the highest pay that you can get in that category? and even make it a little higher. And you could be very nice about it and say, gee, I was thinking of earning that. You don't have to say, I demand that or nothing else. Don't be inflexible. Be nice, smile. Say, I was thinking of that. Is that a possibility? Or I'm sure you're offering that. You can say something like that. But then go through your list. And by the way, it's not bad to have the list in front of you. That's not going to be a detriment to when you're being interviewed. If anything, they're going to see you're well organized and that basically you're again savvy. You're going to make sure you have all your questions answered. So I would begin there. What kind of thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's also a point that is not too, I can say, like, scary for this for our audience, because you're telling them, well, do some research before you come out with a number. So
Right. Yeah, do research just like you did in school. You a research project. This is a research project. Look at it that way.
And now an aspect that relates. So this is a very very objective kind of answer to my question, based on this problem of people not being ready to negotiate, or not being savvy in or not knowing how to swim in those waters. But one thing that I've noticed, and that I think maybe you can help us with, is a question of culture change. So, like we said, in academia, things are very structured, and it's a culture of grant writing, or trying to get financing, be it a PI, be it a researcher or a student. You need to be asking an entity for funding, and students, and especially in the US, less here in Canada, to borrow money to do your studies. But this leads people to often getting to those conversations and having a mindset of, I hope these people give me the job. I hope they like me, and I think you may be seeing where I'm going with this, kind of a subservient, oh please like me and give me the job type situation, where you will probably be less inclined to negotiate more aggressively, and you'll probably accept the first okay thing that's proposed. And I think I wonder whether you have a reflection on that, and I wonder whether there's a way to defend yourself from that, or prepare yourself for that. It could be asking for time to reflect. Anyway, I'm giving you an example, but I'd rather have your.
No, very, very good. Excellent questions. Excellent. So let's begin with. I always like this because I think the biggest gap I see in education today is that there's very few courses, if none, on communications, and especially communications with yourself. Communication with yourself is the most powerful conversation we can have. And so what you're saying is that when you enter an interview like this and you already have the conversation, I hope they like me. They may not like me. Am I asking for too much? Oh my God, am I dressed well? Oh, I didn't say that properly. It's going to show in your performance in your interview. All right. So one thing I'll say is that if you have a chance to take a communication courses as you're in college or in grad school, grab them, because it is the most valuable thing you will have in the business world or outside of academia and inside of academia, quite frankly. But do that. Now, another thing you should do is you should have, before you have the interview, is have a conversation with yourself. And the conversation should be all the things that could go wrong. They won't like me. I'll sneeze. I'll stutter. Whatever you want, have it So you clear. This is when you're contemplating, and then what you say to yourself is that how can I be of value to this company, to that person that's interviewing me? Take a stand for the value you're going to give, or that how you can be of value. If you go into an interview with a mindset of how you're going to explain to them how valuable, how you're going to deliver valuable, what they do, and then ask questions like, how else can I be valuable to you with my credentials? I want to know because I'm an advocate for the success of this company and you. Very powerful. And that's going to differentiate you, by the way, because most interviewers will have never heard that or will not hear that often. Keep in mind the difference that when you're in grad school or academia is, again, it's very structured. It's very boxed in. And if you get a grant, you get a grant, yes, but and you're looked at upon publishing your grants. That's how you're graded. That's not in the outside world. The outside world is basically what you can do, partially for the profitability of the company. But 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 that's the big picture. The smaller picture is how you can make your boss look good. Always keep that in mind. The game out there is your immediate boss. You want to make them look good. And by the way, in your conversations, if you're having that with possibly your immediate supervisor or boss or manager, you want to say, look, um, I want to know how I can make you look good. I want to know what kind of value I can bring to make sure that you people look upon the decision you make for this hire and say that was a great decision. Now you can be as bold as that. And by the way, I'll be very frank. When I was young, I was not that way. I only learned through getting older. I learned playing my second or third job that you have to just basically be straight. You have to be positive. Get the thoughts out of your mind. But that the game is how, because if you make your immediate boss look great and they know you're out to do that, that's a powerful relationship.
That's yeah, that makes total sense. And you just said something very, very important to me, at least, which is I wasn't like that in the beginning. And it was at the second or third job that I started getting better. I think this is very important because clearly that shows that you have a growth mindset, or at least you developed it. But a lot of people, especially people who tend to be more introverted, they will have more of a static mindset and think, "Oh, I'm introverted. I can't perform in interviews. They have this kind of self-limiting belief that it's some sort of, I don't know, stain on their on their on their personal heritage that stays for them with life." And you're telling me, no, you start being bad. Maybe some people start actually being good because somehow they're good. They feel natural in that situation, but most of people actually develop that muscle, and that's a very, very important message in my opinion.
Well, again, I was fortunate that where along the way, some people mentored or guided me, which, by the way, is another extremely important thing to do, even as you're in school or in academia. Is if you're thinking of going to the outside business world, start surrounding yourself with some older, very successful business people. You'll find they'd like to contribute and they're happy to share what they did wrong, how they screwed up, and so that you can avoid that. I mean, that's why I'm saying it today. I mean, I was terrible probably my first one or two interviews, but I learned. And I learned because I got rejected, and I learned because I asked people, and I asked them like, why didn't I get the job? Which, by the way, is another thing. If you don't get the job, it is really nice to call up and say, look, I'm still learning how to really go through interviews, and I'm learning what companies need. And could you tell me why I didn't get this? I mean, for my own personal growth. Another thing too. So again, at the beginning, communications, go through reflective, or what I call clearing your mind before an interview, research, the research project, surround yourself with some mentors, And another thing you can do if you want to, especially if you think you're being too introverted, is have a good friend or a business person interview you. Practice. Get in front of a mirror. And by the way, always smile. Too many people at an interview get really intense and tense, and they're smile.
Yeah, I remember my first ever interview after my bachelor's degree was I was petrified. I wasn't able to have any sort of nice expression on my face just because so how nervous I was.
You just want to get through it. You just want to get through it. I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Can I just say one other thing too? I'm thinking of this because again, I did say, and this is more tax and or financial advice. A lot of people going from academia in the business world, if they're doing it sooner than later, may have student loans. And again, always ask your prospective employer if they can help you out on this or what kind of programs they have or whatever. But in the end, too, really get smart about your options about paying them off. Now, this may not apply to a lot of your audience, but for example, I gave a speech before for physicians who were just ending their programs and they were going out into the practice. And of course, they have $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 in debt. And Sallie Mae, a government agency, would always finance their loans. But Sallie Mae would always make sure they told them, pay them back in 5 to 7 years. And that's quite a burden when you're first getting out. But they don't tell you there's other options. Like you can pay it off over 25 years. And again, why would anyone want loans for 25 years? Well, if you pay off, let's say $210,000 over 7 years, that's $30,000 a year that you have to come up with in after-tax money, which means you have to earn $50,000 to do that. You have to pay your taxes. Okay, if now you pay them off over 25 years, that's like what, less than $10,000, $8,000 a year. Now, if for some reason you could actually pay off the 30, but you only had to pay 8, now you can save $22,000 now in investments and compounding. I showed physicians that if they did that and they put that into pension, that basically they could pay for their entire retirement by the time they're in their early 50s. And at that time, slowly paying off Sallie Mae. So what am I saying here? Run the numbers, make sure your wife, make sure again a research project, see what your options are, and then make the best financial choice.
No, that's great advice. And now, because I'm picking up on things as you talk. And first, this is great advice. I hope you took note. If not, rewind, go back a little bit, and re-listen, because people or entities may not tell you all your options, and they tell the ones that are more favorable to them, not to you.
Sure.
But let's go to first something that you mentioned, which is at the beginning I had a lot of rejections, and I think this happens to mostly everyone. But it happens to everyone, but it hits different people in a different way. I want to talk about this, if possible, with you, and maybe tie it in with something else, which is fear. So when you get rejected, there's a fear that comes with it. But also when you move spaces, be it from academia to outside academia, but also if I work in the pharma industry and then I move to another domain, there's always fear of this novelty, of this unknown, and a lot of people, especially young people coming out of graduate school, have this mix of fear of being overqualified, fear of not being understood or not performing in interviews, and so delaying their entry into the job market. There's a lot of different how can I say, different flavors of financial fear that come at the end of this thing, which is graduate school. Apart, and we forget, and apart from the fact that you now have these loans that you need to pay, thinking about how long is this going to take, and it's known now that it's 6 to 9 months. In this type of transitions, it's normal to take 6 to 9 months. But I wonder whether this is something you have reflected on. Rejection, like you said, is normal. From what you said, I read in between the lines that rejection was actually part of the learning process for you, because you were taking a rejection and then trying to mine some data out of there too. What are good ways to deal with these difficult feelings? Maybe what are good, and given that I'm talking with you, Al, what are good financial actions that I can take, maybe even while I'm in graduate school, to kind of diffuse these fears, maybe to create a financial kind of springboard for that transition, and that you're not, because very often these fears and this tension also leads people to compromise for the first thing that appears, and it's often not the right one.
Well, you said a lot of things, a lot of important things there that many people experience, and quite frankly, some never get over it in their life. No one likes rejection. I don't like it today either, but I mean, I just deal with it a different way. Now, let's talk about fears. You're talking about fears of the unknown. And again, the more data you have, the more known it becomes, right? So, for example, if you see, okay, if I stayed in the academia world, this is what I could expect in either lifestyle and or wealth, if you want to get that way. And if I went in the outside, and again, after doing research on what possible salaries could be, if I got that versus this, how many less years would I have to work for the same amount of wealth? And the way to do that is, before you go out in the world, is start to look at how you want to live your life. Picture it, write it down. I want a family with 3 children. I want a 4-bedroom home. I would like a vacation home. I want to be able to travel at least one special spot a year. And I'd like to be able to maybe write and whatever. And I'd like to be able to not have to work anymore by 55 or 60 or something. But the thing is, what you do is you start creating a vision. And when you start to create that vision, then you can start putting numbers to it. To afford I'm picking this out of the air, $500,000 house, there's a mortgage of this. To afford a vacation home, it's this. To travel to wherever. And you can say, gee, I may need 200,000 a year, 150, whatever. You come up with a number. And then add to that number what you'd have to save or what the company has to put away for you so that you can stop working at a certain time. So now what you've done, instead of having the unknown, whatever they offer you, you accept, is now you know if it's enough or not, and maybe enough to start. But you start clearing up fears this way. So I would get more solid on what it offers you and what your future is, actually numerically. And by the way, you may need someone, you could be a friend or a financial planner, to just basically help you run some numbers, some simple numbers on what kind of wealth you need. Because then you can start to, when a person or you're out with an interview, and you already have an idea what the lifestyle you'd like sometime in the future, where you're beginning, and then you can start looking at then what the potential of that position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And again, it's something that is not complicated to understand or visualize for our audience, because of what we said. They're academics, and it's something they can do. Are there tools that like simulators?
Yeah, there are. But before I get to the tools, let me go back to the rejection.
Yes, rejection.
Because that's so very important. So you understand, when I first was a young man, I hated rejection. I hated, and not only rejection from interviewers, but coworkers, or if you're, especially you're doing it in a position where you have to convince people or whatever, or you give a speech and people don't like it, there's rejection. There's no easy way other than, again, that's the conversation you're having with yourself. Again, they don't like me, I'm not good, or, you know, um, I would say that basically, it may sound odd, the more you put yourself in the line of fire and rejection, the better you get at it. It's like finding the right mate in life. You go out and kiss a lot of other people that you don't like, but and or else they reject you. But the thing is, you still do it, you still try, and you learn from it. Make rejection a learning process, learning how, and then there's an old salesperson's adage that, especially if you're a phone salesman, you're only going to get one person out of every 100 calls to accept it. So, gee, let's get those 99 behind me.
I love it. I love it. I love it. No, for sure, for sure. And I've had this testimony from other guests that actually, yeah, each one of these bouts, is getting you stronger and better, and so you get a better candidate. You learn about yourself. You also hear, you also kind of build this map of questions that people ask. It's, oh, this is a third person who has this question, etc. And the mix of all these things kind of is bringing you forward to the one where things are gonna the match is gonna be there, and you're going to be hired. But people do, and you see it on social media, etc. People take it personally. People, it's tough especially when you're young.
No, it is tough. No one likes rejection. It's very rare anyone that likes it. But it's just part of life. It's like, and the more you put yourself out there, the better you get at it.
Of course.
Now you did ask for some
Yeah.
tools for calculation. They're out there. All you have to do is out there in Google, and you put there's a lot of financial planning tools name escapes me right now.
Projection or simulation or something like that.
Yeah, projections. Retirement projections. Go to a simple retirement projection. Put in the information, but do that after you have visualized what you want. Because if you visualize, if you want to live the way of that life today, and it cost you, let's say, 200,000 or 250, but then you go back to the simulator, then you say, okay, if I wanted that, and I wanted that income inflation adjusted for the rest of my life, starting at age 55 or 60 or 65, you'll start to learn how money works. And what you start doing is, you know how money works. Like, if you have a younger age, you need more money to retire. Longer time, you need less. If you start to get some basics like that, when you're out in the business world, and let's say you found this job that's paying you 150 or 175, and a competing company, or you get a call from a recruiter that says, look, we've seen your work, and there's a company that wants to give you 250 or 200, or they'll do that plus more stock options. You now, again, you have a base you're starting up, and you know what your ultimate goal is. That is rather than flying blind from position to position, do that. Do your research then and along the way. And I tell you, you will be in great shape when you're looking at if you have a job, renegotiating your annual salary or stock bonus, and or jumping ship to another employer.
Yeah, and you were just a few minutes ago mentioning, kind of giving a metaphor of relationships and kissing different people throughout life, and then before finding the one. And I'm thinking of a way to formulate it, but I'll just say it this way. high, people who are headhunters, etc., will have more interest in you once you're in that first position, right?
That's true.
When you are somewhere, when you have a position, that's when you're interesting to competitors. So,
That's true.
yeah, you be patient. Be taking those 99 rejection as like going to the gym for the final bout, and get into that entry position. And this brings me to another issue, which you may have, crossed paths with the people you've worked with, which is, and again, this is something if you just open like some academic social media, you'll see it, which is, well, I now have the highest degree that that academy can give me, and I'm not getting hired because I'm either overqualified or because I go through 7. I just saw someone who's actually a past guest of the show. I went to 7 interviews for this position, and then I didn't get it in the end. And yet here I am, this really high performing, highly qualified person, and there's a frustration there.
I can imagine.
To do with, I thought this was a springboard or a kind of a VIP pass to something, and the market is kind of telling me aim a little lower to enter the market. Is this something you've seen? Do people, because I'm not telling that I think people should be less ambitious, but they should be open to hearing, what the market is saying and thinking, maybe this degree, although it's a very high level degree, maybe it's not the exact fit for what the market wants. So maybe I should open my mind to starting lower and then evolving in a company. Is this a reflection? Is this the type of conversation you've had, or what does this resonate with you, basically, Al?
Well, it does. Look, I think if you're an employer, and I've been an employer and I run a company, you're going to come across people that they're great people, but they're just overqualified, or you have to pay them, or you think you have to pay them too much. So the conversation could be, see, try to have an open conversation with your interviewer. Don't just sit there and just give each other perfunctory questions and answers. You can even sort of prick the bubble and say, look, am I overqualified for this position? Ask them. They may say yes or not. Say, well, then if I am, and then again, this is all optional after this. You can say, look, I don't mind coming in at that level then to show you that. Better than that, though, is, again, if there's certain positions or certain industries you're looking at, is be aware of what the positions you're going after, what the qualifications are, because you can be, if they only want a bachelor's or master's and you have a PhD, your expectations may be off from theirs. So you want to do research as you're going through this of the positions you want. Like again, when I was in grad school, actually when I was in college, I wanted to be a geologist. I realized by my 4th year, going into my 4th year, and I was taking some business courses, but unless I was a geologist or I worked for a geology department of college, that's what it were being offered to me. And I'm sorry, and an oil company. I didn't like that. So I decided, but meantime, I'd gotten an internship or part of a job in the tax field. I love taxes. So I went into business. But then what I did when I went to grad school, but I knew already that to get to the bigger firms in New York City, I had to have my CPA or at least my qualifications for a CPA. They didn't care whether I had a master's degree at that level, but if you did, it was whatever. But I knew I went in there, and then you could take other courses and other education beyond that. I think you have to know that. So another way, if you're not sure of that and the industry of that, I think another great thing to prepare yourself for what the industry demands or the levels. For example, you said you were in big pharma. I worked for a Merck company at one time. Uh, Attend some conferences, attend some industry conferences, and speak to some of the executives there. Make some contact. Say, make some contact to where maybe they'll have job openings, or they'll tell you what's expected if you want that at a certain pharmaceutical firm or whatever. Again, it goes back to preparation, research, and contacts. Quite frankly, start making contacts early. By the way, if you have people in academia that have gone out in the world already, stay in contact with them.
Yeah, for sure.
How's it going for them? What mistakes did they make? What can you do? So contacts, especially as you become more senior in academia, is extremely important.
Of course, and this is something I keep. It's like a note on the piano. I keep hammering on the same note, because graduate school, especially the PhD, tends to get you super laser focused in this extreme tunnel vision, and very often means that you don't network during that stint of.
Well, you also narrow yourself too, don't you? As you go higher, you narrow, and quite frankly, you want to stay broad. You don't want to get yourself so narrow.
Exactly, and you don't want to lose touch with maybe interests or I don't know, positions that you've had in the past, even if they were student positions. You don't want to lose touch with that and with those people. But often that's the error we fall into, and I'm super grateful that you mention the importance of talking with people in a kind of a broader spectrum than just the subject that you're working on.
And
because that
I would also say too, don't be afraid. If you want to eventually get a PhD in that narrow niche, don't be afraid, basically masters or somewhere around there, to go out and experiment. Go out and go into the field, because I will tell you, real life out there in business is a lot different. And you may find there's another specialty or two or something that either has more potential for you or that you happen to like.
No, for sure. And and again, it's by talking with people who are out there doing different things that you learn this. Of course, listening to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD also, because I try to talk with all these people each week. Now, we've covered fear, we've covered rejection. There's two things I still want to ask. And one is a curiosity, because you mentioned it a couple of times during the conversation, that there are ways an employer, and we're talking about the States, the United States, but it could apply elsewhere. There are ways an employer can help you or can somehow optimize the way you take care of your student loans. And this is, it's something I really know nothing about, and I'd love if you would be able to give an example of how they can help you. What are mechanisms that you've seen employers sometimes have to help people with their loans?
Well, let's take someone who's either they've graduated from college and they're thinking of master's and/or eventual PhD programs. Our firm, Trausalis, if you wanted to go now for your master's, we would pay for the whole thing. Now, you had to stay with us for 2 or 3 years. If you didn't, you had to reimburse us partially, and it decreased. You vested more in it as time went on. But there's programs like that, because you may have someone, instead of going out and having another $50,000 in student loans for your master's or your PhD, you may have an employer who's willing to do that. You just have to make sure you're going to stay there. Now, that's one way. Another way, and this would apply more probably to more smaller companies, but in your negotiations, you could say to them, by the way, this doesn't happen that often, but again, I believe in asking for the impossible to get the ridiculous. And you can say, look, keep in mind, when you pay back 10,000 of student loans, you have to earn 16,000, 17,000 to pay your taxes on that 10,000, right? If you're in a 30 to 40% tax bracket. Okay, good. So if you sit with the company and say, look, you're going to pay me 180,000, I'll tell you what, I'll take 150 if you pay off 30,000 of my loans every year. You see, and you submit the bills to them. Now again, depending on the countries, depending on the companies, but the thing is you ask for that because keep in mind, this could benefit a company also. If they're paying you less and they're giving you that other perk, now again, not it all depends what state you're in, especially the United States, but they pay less taxes, payroll taxes to the government based on lower compensation to you. Okay, so keep on be creative. Again, have conversations. The more that you go into an interview, working together, and again, value what you can gather, you can give them. You can ask anything, and you have you have now an open and active negotiation because they want to see what's necessary for you, and you want to see what's necessary for them. So that makes sense for you.
That's it does make sense to me. It's a great insight, and it's something you're the first person mentioning this to me, at least in this way, which is you can bring some creativity into the negotiation, and which ends up helping you and the employer if it's a solution like the one you mentioned. But it's really, really interesting, and it's something I wouldn't have instinctively done. But now that you've mentioned it,
By the way, I want to go
yeah,
back
go
to another
ahead.
thing I said about being self-employed. Because again, suppose
Yes.
someone comes to you and say, well, how much you want? And they want you to be self-employed. Okay. Keep in mind, when they're paying you as a self-employed person, they can pay you higher than if you were an employee. Why? Because see, as a self-employed, you're eventually going to find your own health insurance, and to find other things. But for them, they've got to pay their part of your Social Security program. They've got to pay into pension possibly. They've got to pay other state and local taxes, payroll taxes, and benefits. And for larger companies, for for every 100,000 they're paying you, they may have to pay another 30 or 40,000 in taxes or benefits. By the way, I did this when I sold my company. I became self-employed with them for a while. And what I did is I said, okay, now I was getting that salary with you. Now I want 40% more since I'm self-employed. And I got it. Oh, and actually they said, we'll give you 25, which is fine with me because I was saving a lot of money with basically what I can now deduct, like office and home and my travel, whatever. So I was happy with that. So see, again, it's going to cost them 35 to 40%. So you can get another to a 25%, 30% by being self-employed.
Okay. See, that's also super interesting because again, I know a lot of academics, scientists who end up being consultants and being and people, and some have had journeys like yours of being first hired, but then kind of moving to a consultant position where they're now external and they get a higher pay, but they come out of that kind of employee structure. That's super interesting, and again, if you're listening, and if it's the first time that you're hearing about these things, take note, because again, it'll help you in your negotiations and it'll help you in your planning. Now, the last thing there was a last question I wanted to ask you, but before now I have a reflection that's coming up, which is, it feels to me, and it does make sense, Al, that Excel is probably your best friend, or is our best friend when trying to navigate this. Am I reading this wrong? Because it feels to me that there's a lot of and also these projection tools that we said, but if we do what you proposed and what you recommended, then it'll be easy in these conversations to understand, okay, if I'm now external, then I plug it into my Excel file.
I agree. It comes back to knowledge is power. Knowledge
Yeah.
is your friend. Knowledge will reduce fear. Knowledge will reduce the unknown. The more you know about who you're dealing with and the numbers you need. Know always what you need, right? If you don't know what you need, you're just going to wind up with whatever is going to be out there. So, no, I think that's extremely important. Yes, numbers, Excel, research, these are all your best friends.
Exactly. And this is why, I'm super happy that you were able to take some time to be here today, because this is, none of this is going to fall into Dev's ears with my audience, because it's all things they know and they understand. They just now know that they need to apply it to their financial planning and to their
May I
career
just say
planning.
one other thing, especially if you have the people who are self-employed or as consultants? I see this all the time, is that again, you don't do this work and what you need, and you undercharge per hour or per day. I remember I had a consultant who was busy, his schedule was filled, and he had many clients, but he was just barely making it. He couldn't save. He had a nice lifestyle, couldn't save. And so I sat down with him, and after going through analysis, I said, double your rate per day. He looked at me in horror. He said, I'll lose my clients. No one will hire me. I said, you already are overwhelmed now. I said, if you double, you may lose some, but you know what? I don't think you will. But I tell you what, let's try an experiment. Anyone new, double your rate. Keep your rates the same for everyone and see what happens. Within 6 months, he said, I'm raising everyone. He said, because I see that I'm getting the same new clients and they're paying me twice. So he ends up earning twice the amount of money for the same amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. That's an important inflection. It's a different, the fact that he, looked at you wide-eyed and scared. uh, it's, I totally understand it. And again, one of the other aspects, I think, of the academic culture, especially when you're just coming out of graduate school, is that there's one skill that we don't develop, which is valuing our work and our time. We are coming out of an ordeal, an adventure, where the ask was do more, do more, do more, with no change in your pay. Uh, and it's when someone tells you you need to double your rate, it is scary, because it's hard to wrap your head around it. But again, if you've done that work, that groundwork that you mentioned, it'll be logical. Like, okay, for things to work, I cannot keep going at this pace, and I do need to raise my rates. It makes total sense.
Just never be afraid to try something.
Sure,
Never
sure.
be afraid to pivot.
Yeah,
If it's not working, tell them to pivot. There's always a way to get what you want. The mountain that you want is still the distance. You just have to sometimes take side roads to get there.
yeah. No, for sure, for sure. And never also be afraid to find help. No, talk with someone like you, Al. And we'll talk about K Club in a minute, before a last small question. But find, if you feel that you're lost, find help, find mentors. Don't go it alone, because it'll be a long time, an unnecessarily long time to get somewhere where you're comfortable. And invest some time and even maybe money in some help. Then it kind of boosts you into that sweet spot faster. Now, we're reaching the end of the interview, but there's one last question that I've been wanting to ask, which has to do with that kind of span of time of 3, 6, 9 months, where you're not going to be, you're going to be interviewing, you're going to be, doing that research and finding jobs and employers that you like, and applying, but the job is not going to come for a little while. And that is, for some people, especially if they haven't traveled for their studies, they may kind of they may kind of find support in their family structure, whatever. But a lot of us, especially in graduate school, like me, I came from Portugal here to Montreal, and there's people traveling all the time to get their masters, to get their PhD, and it's not, it can be very stressful. And so, how do you, how do you? Because someone could say, well, no, I'm not going to. I'm just going to use my reserves that I've kept from graduate school, and just put my head down and just just apply until I get something. I wonder whether this is the right way to go, because some people would say that. Other people that I've talked with have said no. As I was applying, I needed to keep paying my bills, etc. So I got a job that didn't require any academic education to pay the bills. Is there a balance to strike? Is there a kind of a blueprint to follow? Is there a story that you've seen, or is there something that you can share about that? Because I know there's a lot of, again, fear, stress at that transition, and people don't really know, especially if they don't have mentors, if they don't have advisors. It's tough to know what's the right decision and what's the right thing to do, because you do want that good, prestigious, well-paid job, but it may not come right away.
Yeah, and quite frankly, there's also the feeling that if you work at something else, especially you might think it's below yourself or beneath yourself. So let's get real. So you don't look good, and people don't not like to look good. So you're not looking good, and it doesn't feed your ego to where you might have to work in a restaurant or whatever. I don't care where it is. But so just so you understand what I did, I worked in a bakery for 3 months. My father was a baker, so I had an inside job to get a job there. But I worked at making donuts and cakes and all that. So, I had to pay the bills. My father would be glad to help me a little, but he said, "But you're going to work, kid." And you eventually find your job. So, I would say that if you have family that's willing to support you, or you have reserves, and you want to approach that way, there's no wrong way. But there's no wrong in doing something else. And actually, you might have fun at it, knowing that's not your long-term job, your long-term career, and you might, who knows, you may even make a contact. I remember in New York City one time I took a taxi, and the guy was from Egypt, the driver, and we started talking, and I found out he was an accountant, and he's looking for a job in New York City. So I hooked him up with a couple of people. So there's no wrong just in how you approach it. Just don't be afraid to try other things, and nothing's beneath you. It's another experience in life that'll help you somewhere along the way.
Mm-hmm. And I love this. I love this message, and yeah, the fact that you're doing something now doesn't erase what you've done in the past and the potential you have.
But by the way, I would not list that on your resume.
Towards what comes next. No, of course, but yeah, for sure. But you need to pay.
Can I say one other thing? By the way, in an interview, you may be. Well, I may ask you. Well, you don't have a job right now. Sure. What have you been doing? Now, again, it's how you gauge the interviewer, right? But you may say, well, I'm waiting to do this, and I'm dedicated to finding that job. But you know what? Right now, I'm helping out my father doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing odd jobs because, I like the experience that gives me in dealing with other people. Again, you have to gauge how stuffy and/or the person is that's interviewing you. But it could be something that they admire, that you had the chutzpah or whatever to go out and to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. But again, this is, as you do more interviews, you start learning the profiles of people, and then you'll see, it's a case by case. You'll see whether you can or cannot do that. Perfect. Al, so we're getting really to the end of the interview, and I wonder whether now is the right time to maybe talk about where, if people want to ask some questions, people want to maybe they read your book and want to know a little bit more. What's the best place to reach out to you? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it on your website? How can people reach out and
Right. Well, obviously, if you want to read my book, which I like to think is pretty good, is you can go on Amazon and you'll see it there. I'm on LinkedIn, AJ Zdenek at LinkedIn. You can go on K Club. Now, go to kclubapp.com. If you go to kclub.com, you'll go to a K Club. Go to kclubapp.com. And what you'll see there, and by the way, we have a website, but we're very close to launching our app. And our app is a neat thing to explore if you want to. It helps with creating a spending plan for you. And then also, if you list your credit cards, you don't have to give us the information, but you list them. When you go out to shop, it'll tell you which card to use to get the most points, to get the most cash back, rewards, or whatever. And we're going to add other things to it. We're also working on a artificial intelligence where if you have a question, you can ask Zdenek. You can say Zdenek, and Zdenek will answer you. Because all my books, my hundreds of articles are all loaded into artificial intelligence. So if anyone wants to go to LinkedIn and ask me a simple question, to go to kclubapp.com. I'd be more than happy. My mission in life has always been to be a powerful, positive, and helpful influence, successful influence in the lives of others. And even though I sold my company, my mission still is my mission. So that's why I'm doing it now through kclubapp.com and other things I do.
Sure, and thanks for sharing all of that. Now, I'm curious myself about K Club app. Can you talk a little bit more? So K Club is the financial technology company that kind of birthed K Club app. Take a minute talking about why you're building this website and eventually an app. And how it can help graduate students and scientists and
Sure.
researchers today.
Well, I think we can agree that financial education in whether it's high school or college or grad school is just non-existent or terrible. So eventually what you do, you're doing what your parents did, or another friend will tell you what to do, whatever. And you can have really talented learned people graduating and have no idea how to make a good financial decision. So my goal in my book, and the way I've always taught in my speeches and my classes, has always been how to teach people to always make the best financial decision for themselves. So, for example, I told you when you're looking for a job, make a vision, get down the numbers, right? Because if you know the numbers, as you're negotiating, you're making the best financial decisions for yourself. Whether you're buying or leasing a car, paying off a student loan, how you're doing it, I went through that. These are all financial decisions you're going to make, and most people make them with a gut feeling, or that's what my father and mother did, or something. And quite frankly, most of the time, they're not good for your particular situation. So, again, my wealth company, it was a Trousdale's Wealth Management. We used to teach that, and we used to teach to help you find cash flow. So, again, I sold that company. But again, my mission doesn't stop because I sell the company. I still want to be that. I sell my mission. So a young man who read my books, he's a data scientist, the double PhD. He came to me and said, "Al, I read the book. Let's start an app." And he had a mission to teach people financial literacy. And that's my mission too, is to do that. And so we're creating this app to have basically teach people to overall to make better financial decisions, watch your spending, but then also helping you to find some cash to save so you can get to retirement sooner or whatever you want in life. So that's why we're developing this, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you for that, and I think it's a great mission to have. I think it's great that you crossed paths with someone who had the idea and also the the keyboard hands to make it happen in terms of an app.
Yes,
um,
yes,
and not,
that's true.
and which again goes to show that having an open mind, having conversations, is what opens doors to different opportunities in life. But I do feel that, especially for the audience, the Papa PhD audience, and I'm trying to kind of summarize or give or make it like kind of a take home message that I'm taking from this conversation, is at each time that you in your academic life first have a turning point, let's say bachelor's to master's to PhD, do this exercise that Al recommended, and try to project where will this next, so after your bachelor's, where will a master's, where will what does a master uh, mean in terms of my professional and financial future? And then same thing for, okay, I decided to go for the master. Now, do I go to a PhD? Think about it. Here in Canada, there's the this line of fast track where you can, if you do well in the first year of your masters, or in your masters, you can fast track to a PhD. So you don't get your masters, and you kind of wormholed into a PhD program. For some people it works, especially if somehow you're very young, and your work is always getting published quite well, etc. And there's a stellar academic career for you. That's everyone can see it written on the wall. But for most people, I would say, don't take the fast track. Take the slow track. Take time to research. Take time to kind of simulate where each. You remember those books we used to have when we were kids? Choose your own adventure. So take time to do this research, to do the math, and to see, okay, it seems prestigious, for example, the PhD, but what does it actually mean? What is life looking like for people who are out there post PhD, and go through life, taking educated decisions. And I think that's what I'm
Right, definitely.
taking home, and I feel that that's what you want people to do.
I totally agree. Don't follow blindly a path. Keep on asking your questions, and if you can, experiment along the way.
Al, this has been a great conversation. The last question I usually keep for all guests is, you know people, young researchers, and maybe even more more veteran academics, but for people out there who may feel that they are in this kind of very reality to another, and having to take very quick decisions, or being, oh, there was a my my sound cut. And am I coming through now? Okay. No worries, no worries. So I was saying, for people who are out there feeling that, okay, maybe I need I need the K Club app, I need some sort of financial literacy that I don't have, um, and who feel that they're maybe pressured into taking decisions, for example, oh, do I fast track to a PhD, or do I take this job that actually the offer is not, I don't feel that it's very good, but it's the only one that's happening right now, and it's been already 3 months since my thesis defense. Do you have kind of a last word of inspiration or encouragement, that would enlighten them in a different way than what we've said in the past hour, maybe based on your story?
Well, on my story, I would tell you I probably changed direction in my career 5 or 6 times. All right, it amazes me how I started out and where I am today. And sometimes it was forced upon me. Like there was one time in my business, I almost went bankrupt, almost. And good people helped me get out of it, but it helped me see another way to further my career. So what I say to you is that don't get so rigidly focused on the present that you're not willing to have something else come into your life to give you an experience in a different direction. You know, again, people from academia is they're coming from a rigid environment and rigid courses to get to a PhD. That's not what the real world is like. And so the real world is more like flexibility, be flexible, and learn to pivot, and don't be afraid to try something else. I'm very happy all the experiences that have happened to me, even though some of them have not been positive, because they helped me to find the direction I eventually loved. You know, I would say this: you eventually, if you get out there, you want to have a job that pays well and will get you to where you want to go. And if you happen to love it along the way, you've hit a trifecta. But at least have two of three of those things, right? And the only way you get that is constantly pivoting and constantly trying.
That's it. And talking with different people
Always
along the journey, for sure. Al, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this hour with you. It's point of view, and you know, it's from your expertise that I haven't had the podcast yet, and so I'm really grateful for, again, the time you took to be here with me, for all the generosity and sharing the knowledge you've shared today, and yeah, I also want to share my wish that your work, especially your work with the K Club app, goes the best as possible, and that you reach and that you raise the level of financial literacy for as many people as possible. Not only the Papa PhD audience.
Well, that's very nice of you, David. So appreciate you having me on the show. You asked great questions, and I hope I was of some value to your audience.
Definitely, you definitely were. They have a lot to think about. I hope they've taken notes. If not, go back and take notes. And they have a lot of action items that they can follow. So for me, it's really complete.